Going to talk about chapter 6, early childhood. Kind of a fun chapter, and then it gets a we start talking about child abuse. Um, okay, well, early childhood. No, let's go ahead and do this. There we go. Bodily growth and change. At about 3, children begin to look more slender and athletic. Abdominal muscles develop, and the toddler potbelly tightens. Trunk, arms, and legs grow longer. The head is still relatively large. Both boys and girls will grow 2 to 3 inches per year and gain 4 to 6 pounds. The early lead a boy has at birth is maintained and will be continued through puberty, when girls will catch and pass boys. And there is my grandson at about 3 or 4. That's his buddy JJ. And that's what he looked like when he was 1 year old. So he's 3 or 4 years old, as you can see. He's taller and more slender. There he is at about a year and a half. There he is at about 2. There he is at 3. Cartilage begins turning to bone faster after the age of 3, giving children a more rigid structure. This is usually needed since a child tends to become more adventurous and requires the added protection of the hardened bones. One of the interesting phenomena of children at this age is the flexibility of their hardening bones. When a child hurts a limb, there might actually be damage that is difficult to see on an x-ray. This is known as a green stick fracture because the bone breaks in a similar manner to a green stick. It doesn't separate, the bone doesn't separate, it just cracks. And this is a green stick fracture right here. It's right there. I'm going to show you another one. Yeah, that's what it looks like. See, it doesn't break all the way through. And that's why they call it a green stick fracture. Normally what happens is you wrap that, you can wrap that break and it will heal completely. Right now it's just a little bit bent. And there's another one, as you can see. Green stick. Muscular, skeletal, and nervous system growth increases as children begin to look more and more like little adults. While it is important that children get good food in adequate amounts, many children of this age become picky eaters. A diminished appetite at this age is normal. A child may seem to eat small amounts, but it is probably enough to keep themselves properly nourished. A child does require a proper amount of sleep for good growth. Maintaining a 20-minute period of relaxation before bedtime will set the mood for a good night's sleep. Let me give you a little bit of a warning. I had 2 nieces who were very, very picky eaters. Um, they would only eat cheese pizza. They would only drink Coke. And they ate French fries and breakfast sausage. That's all they would eat. So their mother had to carry around a deep fat fryer so that she could make them French fries. They wouldn't drink milk. They wouldn't eat anything else. They wouldn't eat any vegetables. The only meat they ate was the sausage. Now we didn't have any bad news about these 2 girls. Now they're in their 40s, but both of them have developed autoimmune diseases. There are 4 girls in that family, and of the 4 girls, the other 2 have no problems whatsoever. They ate anything that you put in front of them. But the 2 picky eaters have developed these really strange um, autoimmune diseases, as interesting as that is. So potentially, who knows? Does it have something to do with the way they ate for the first 10 years of their life? The answer probably is yes. It probably does have something to do with it. So that's a cautionary tale. I have 2 nieces with autoimmune diseases. They're fairly severe. One has to do with one's liver, and they both have to do with the liver. So just something to put in the back of your mind. It's not a bad thing to be Picky eating is children have a better sense of taste, and so that's one of the reasons why they really don't like vegetables. Most of them don't like vegetables, especially the crucifers because they have such an interesting flavor. But it's not good. It's not good to allow them to be that picky an eater. Preschoolers eat less in proportion to their size than infants do. Obesity today is more common among preschoolers than we have ever seen before. And a lot of this has to do with being picky eaters because they're only eating select foods, and the foods that they eat are not very nutritious. Fast and snack foods seem to dominate diets. These fat foods are full of fat and sugar. Children should be fed from the five major food groups with an eye kept on the fat content. Meats and dairy products are essential to good bone growth and muscle growth. 11% of all 4 to 5-year-old boys and 5% of all 4 to 5-year-old girls are considered obese. Obesity is categorized when body mass index, or BMI, weight in comparison with height, is in the 95th percentile. The proportion of children ages 6 to 17 who are obese more than doubled between 1981 and 1991 from 5% to 11%. Oddly, the standard for obesity has changed from 85 percentile to 95 percentile, and still the numbers have more than doubled. Obesity often results from an inherited tendency, aggravated by too little exercise and too much or the wrong kinds of food. Environment is influential since children model the eating habits of the people around them. Inactivity may be a major factor. Obese children often suffer emotionally because of taunts from peers. They tend to become overweight adults, which leads to high blood pressure, heart disease, orthopedic problems, and diabetes. Over-concern with body image can lead to eating disorders, especially among girls. In one study of 9 to 10-year-old girls, 40% were trying to lose weight. Trends in obesity among U.S. adults 1991 to 2000. 1991, as you can see, not very many people were obese. 1995, east of the Mississippi River had a lot of problems. This is in 2000. Everybody's got problems. That section that was a problem before now has 20% obesity. Obesity in the United States. This is where I live right now, and yeah, there's some pretty portly people here. This is where you guys live. It's a little bit more active. The people are a little bit more active. The only state that has low obesity rates is Colorado, and it's 10 to 14%. Iowa's over 25%. Arizona and New Mexico are no, Arizona and New Mexico are 20% to 24%. Colorado is 15 to 19%. Comparison of percentage of population classified as obese. As far as females are concerned, the most obese country is the United States. The least obese country is France. Among the males, the most obese country is Argentina, and the least obese country is France. This is the United States, Argentina, Mexico, that's Russia, that's Finland. No, that's Finland. This is Denmark, I'm sorry. Denmark, Germany, Finland, that's Spain, and that's Italy. So there you go. Tooth decay in early childhood often stems from overconsumption of sweetened milk and juices in infancy. Permanent teeth, which begin to develop long before they appear at the age of 6, may be affected if thumb sucking does not stop after the age of 4. And this is the reason that there is an overbite for children who suck their thumb. This is somebody that sucked their thumb, and this is what it looked like after they fixed their teeth. And that's the reason why. Most adult teeth arrive when primary teeth begin to fall out at age 6 years. Between 1974 and 1994, the number of children with untreated cavities dropped nearly 80%. Much of the improvement is attributed to adhesive sealants on the chewing surfaces, and that's why you see so many people with such beautiful teeth now. I'm jealous because none of these sealants existed when I was a child, and I don't have the most attractive teeth in the world. So I'm really jealous of those of you with gorgeous teeth. Sleep patterns and problems. Children in different cultures may get the same amount of sleep each day, but its timing may vary. Young children may develop elaborate routines to put off retiring. Transitional objects or bedtime companions help a child shift from dependence in infancy to independence in later childhood. In one longitudinal study, children who were allowed transitional objects at age 4 tended to be well adjusted teenagers by age 16. Motor skills, gross motor skills involve the large muscles such as running and jumping, sports, dancing, etc. My grandson does soccer. He plays basketball. He plays football. Of course, he's older now. Fine motor skills involve small muscles in hands, fingers, such as tying shoelaces and cutting with scissors, writing and drawing, etc. He went to preschool, and this is him at preschool. This is him. This is all the other people trying to cut paper. They're trying to cut pictures out of paper. I think he was somewhere between 2 and 3 years old at this stage. This little blonde girl used to always sit beside him for some reason. So anytime we found a picture of him from the preschool, this little girl was right beside him. Handedness is the preference for using one hand over the other. This is usually evident by 3 years of age. Most people are left hemisphere dominant, and so they become right-handed. If the left and right hemispheres are symmetrical, the individual will become left-handed. About 10% of any population are left-handed. Artistic development. Children's early pictures show energy and freedom. Later, they show care and accuracy. Coughs, sniffles, stomach aches, and runny noses are part of early childhood. Since the lungs are not fully developed, respiratory problems are fairly common, though not as frequent as they were during infancy. 3 to 5 year olds average 7 to 8 colds or other respiratory illnesses in any given year. These minor illnesses tend to build immunity and actually assist in fighting off more severe diseases, such as COVID. As the child ages, they will contract fewer and fewer respiratory illnesses. This is my grandson when he was about 3 years old. He had a fever, and he was up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and the cat was so far asleep that she allowed him to touch her, and that was the first time he ever got to touch her. So my daughter took a picture of him. Motor vehicle injuries. 20% of the child deaths due to motor vehicle accidents are alcohol related. 2/3 of these deaths are due to a drunk driver in the child's own vehicle. All the states in the United States require children to ride in special safety seats or to wear seat belts. Children and adults who are small are in danger from airbags. In many states, children are required to ride only in the back seat, and usually in the passenger side in the back seat is the safest place for a child to be. In most states, childproof caps are required on all medications to prevent accidental poisoning. Children born to women under the age of 20 are 15 times more likely to die from accidental injury. Preschoolers and daycare centers are 2 to 4 times more likely to pick up mild illnesses than children raised at home. They tend to pick up colds, flu, diarrhea, middle ear infections, which is also known as otitis media. Otitis means ear infection, media means in the middle ear infection, gastrointestinal illnesses, and hepatitis A. In the United States, 43% of children between 2 months and 11 years are exposed to secondhand smoke every day. This increases the probability that the child will develop bronchitis, serious infectious diseases, otitis media once again, burns, and asthma. There are more children living in poverty in the United States than there were in 1973. Low income is the chief factor associated with poor health in children and adolescents. Many times, the health problems begin before birth as the future mother is malnourished and receives inadequate nutrition during pregnancy. Medicaid has served as a safety net for the very poor. 890,000 children in the United States have high levels of lead in their blood. This happens because they are exposed to lead fumes or eat lead-contaminated food or water. Lead-based paints in older houses are also a source of contamination. Lead poisoning is associated with sensory motor problems, lower IQ, poor academic achievement, hyperactivity, short attention span. Maltreatment is a deliberate or avoidable endangerment of a child. Abuse is an action that inflicts harm, for example, physical, sexual, or verbal harm. Neglect or physical, sexual, or verbal abuse. Neglect is an action that leads to harm. For example, not meeting a child's basic needs such as food, clothing, and medical care. This is really tragic. Probably none of you have seen this. You haven't seen this very much, if at all. Working in the emergency room, we would get, well, on bad nights, we'd get 3 or 4 cases of child abuse. It just broke your heart. Some of these little guys, they're being so stoic, but their parents had done something to them, broken a bone or cut them, or this child was dipped in scalding hot water. In 2012, 3.3 million cases of child abuse were reported in the United States involving 6 million children. 78% involved neglect, 18% involved physical abuse, 9% involved sexual abuse. More than half the reported victims are 7 years old or younger. 1/4 are below the age of 4. Girls are 3 times as likely as boys to be sexually abused. Boys are the most likely to be physically abused or neglected. 8 out of 10 cases of sexual abuse are perpetrated by the child's parents. 2/3 of the abuse cases are by the child's biological parents. In 2018, 4.3 million cases of child abuse were reported in the United States involving 7.8 million children. 60.8% involved neglect, 10.7% involved physical abuse, 7% involved sexual abuse. Just over half the reported victims were 5 years old or younger. 26.7% were less than 1 year of age, while 25% were between 2 and 5 years of age. 5 children die every day as a result of child abuse. 80% of the children who die from abuse are under the age of 4 years. 50 to 60% of fatalities due to maltreatment are not recorded as such as on the death certificate. 1/3 to 2/3 of child maltreatment cases involve substance use to some degree. Children whose parents abuse alcohol and other drugs are 3 times more likely to be abused and 4 times more likely to be neglected as children of non-abusing parents. 2/3 of the people in treatment for drug abuse admit to being abused or neglected as children. They think it's the way you're supposed to raise your children. You got to raise them tough. And if you don't raise them tough, then they won't end up tough. Maltreatment by parents represents extremely poor child rearing practices. Family problems are often exacerbated by poverty, alcoholism, and antisocial behavior. A disproportionate number of abuse cases come from large, poor, or single-parent families who cannot meet the needs of their children. However, most low-income parents do not abuse their children. Many abusers are lonely, unhappy, anxious, depressed, angry, or aggressive. They tend to have low self-esteem, poor impulse control, and poor coping skills. About one-third of abusive parents were abused themselves as children. In one-third of the cases, substance abuse is a factor. Abusive parents tend to be overly involved with their children. Deprived of good parenting themselves, they tend to be upset by behavior that most parents accept as normal. Abuse may occur when an already stressed parent attempts to control a child physically and ends up shaking, striking, or squeezing the child. Abusive parents tend to have marital problems and fight physically. Their household tends to be disorganized. They tend to experience stressful events. Many isolate themselves from society and have no one to turn to in times of stress. Neglectful parents tend to be apathetic, incompetent, irresponsible, emotionally withdrawn. Abused children tend to be overly needy or demanding. They tend to cry often or may be unresponsive. The child's greater needs may stem from poor health, difficult personalities, or physical disabilities. They are more likely to be preterm or low birth weight, hyperactive, have a mental deficit, physically handicapped, have behavioral abnormalities. Neighborhood factors that lead to abusive environments include poverty, unemployment, job dissatisfaction, social isolation, lack of social service assistance, high crime rates. In societies where societal violence is rare and physical punishment of children is frowned upon, child abuse is rare, such as places such as Japan, China, and Tahiti. In contrast, the United States is one of the most violent cultures among the industrialized nations. Maltreatment can produce grave long-term consequences. They can be physical, cognitive, or social. They are more likely to repeat a grade. They are more likely to do poorly on cognitive tests. They are more likely to have behavior problems in school. As infants, abused children tend to have disorganized, disoriented attachment to their parents. They have a hard time developing social skills and tend to have a hard time making friends. They may become either overly aggressive or withdrawn. They tend to be fearful, uncooperative, and less able to respond appropriately to friendly overtures. Reactions to sexual abuse: preschoolers may react with anxiety. They may talk about nightmares. They may have inappropriate sexual behavior. Normally, if you're dealing, normally if you're dealing with a preschooler, um, and they display this strange sexual behavior like they're teenagers, um, then that's usually the key. It's not them talking about their nightmares or their anxiety. It's the fact that they're doing things that, why in the world do they know how to do this stuff? That's usually what you will notice, the inappropriate sexual behavior. School-age children will show fear, mental illness, aggression, nightmares, school problems, hyperactivity, and regressive behavior if they are sexually abused. What you will notice is the sexual behavior, or regressive behavior. Also, there is some degree of inappropriate sexual behavior as well. Adolescents: depression, withdrawn, suicidal, self-injurious behavior, physical complaints, illegal acts, running away, and substance abuse. These are injurious acts. This young girl has burned herself with a cigarette, and this one is a cutter. Okay, so all of these things may point toward sexual abuse. Usually it's the self-injurious behavior that you'll see. Um, all of the other things are just will be tied into that. Inappropriate sexual behavior, of course, is to some extent, but it's the self-injurious behavior that you will notice. While most do not, abused children are more likely to become delinquent, criminal, or mentally ill. A longitudinal study following 68 victims of childhood sexual abuse found that they suffered from lower self-esteem, depression, anxiety, and unhappiness. I just read a book about a child growing up in an abusive home. There were four children, and actually all four of the children turned out fine. One had a PhD and was a college professor. One worked for the federal government. Well, actually, one worked in politics. One was a teacher, and the other one had a steady job. Anyway, he had a steady job. It was really kind of interesting because you followed in the book. You followed them all the way through. It's a true story. It's a biography or autobiography. It's called The Paleface Lie, and most of it takes place in Fort Defiance and in Gallup. The individuals worked for the BIA. The father claimed to be a Cherokee, and that's how he got his job, by claiming to be a Cherokee. The children, of course, claimed to be Cherokee as well. Turns out that they weren't. That they had no Native American ancestry at all. And that was the lie. It was the pale face lie was the fact that they claimed to be Cherokee, and they really weren't. But they were abused by their father. Their father was suffering from antisocial personality disorder, which was never diagnosed. But this individual was a bully. He was a bully to people around him. He was a bully to his children, and eventually the children got away from him. Usually they got old enough and they moved away. Now the interesting thing was that all the children developed relationships with another adult that led them into a positive outcome, except the one child. And then the child that's writing the book is the one that was never able to get away from his father. Anyway, interesting book, The Paleface Lights. It's a relatively new book. I think it came out last year. But if you want to read about, well, it's about the Navajo Reservation mostly. It's a really interesting book. And if you can find a copy of it, you can see the father was a very, very attractive man, and that's one of the reasons why he was able to get away with stuff, because people don't think that attractive people are bad. He was pretty bad. The mother was very attractive as well, but she, and even after she left him, or actually he left her, she married another man, and she was always in love with this very attractive, abusive, extremely abusive person that had tried to murder her several times, and got the kids involved in the assaults on the mother. In emotional maltreatment, the effects are harder to pinpoint, but the problems are linked to lying, stealing, low self-esteem, emotional maladjustment, dependency. This is emotional maltreatment. Underachievement, depression, aggression, learning disorders, homicide and suicide. Really kind of curious. People that are emotionally abused don't respect their own life, and they don't respect other people's lives. So murdering other individuals is not uncommon. A little less common than, well, it's not uncommon. Helping families in trouble or at risk, intervention strategies should be comprehensive, neighborhood-based, centered on protecting children, and aimed at strengthening families. State and local child protective services agencies investigate reports of child maltreatment and determine what steps, if any, need to be taken. Many children learn aggressive behavior from their families. Aggression is defined as any hostile action that causes fear and leads to forceful contact with another. It can be directed at people or things. It can be physical, verbal, or both. It can be positive or negative. And you can watch children play and you can see which ones of them have learned aggressive behavior by the way or the frequency that they use, where they use violent activity to get what they want. And the way that they strike things. If they strike things as if they're hammering, then that is potentially demonstrates that they have been shown how to attack other people by either watching somebody else attack another person. Of course, you can pick this up on television sometimes, but we don't really see that type of behavior on television anymore. We did there for a while, but they've stopped putting that on cartoons and whatnot. So you can tell by the way that they attack other people as to whether they have learned that from someone. In early childhood, physical aggression tends to decrease as verbal aggression increases. Researchers see the ability to make their wishes known and delay gratification as reasons to reduce physical aggression. Yeah, this one kid has pulled the car over. I'm laughing, but I'm sure the little kid that was in the car at the time didn't. That's a road rage for you right there. Research ideas as to where aggression originates can be genetic, psychobiology, cognitive processes, or family environment. All children act aggressively at times, despite the rationale supporting it. Researchers feel that aggressive behavior can be curtailed by reinforcing prosocial behavior. There are other differences between males and females than reproductive anatomy. Boys are more vulnerable from conception through the first year, but tend to be longer and heavier than their female counterparts. They seem to be more active from birth. They react to stress differently. Gender typing is common in most cultures and tends to be promoted by the males. This is shown in rougher play with boys and more sensitivity in girls. Verbal ability, girls tend to begin speaking earlier and maintain this superiority in verbal ability over boys all their lives. Mathematics, after puberty, boys' math scores tend to be higher than girls, and they tend to do better and participate in more complex math courses. Spatial ability, boys seem to have a greater ability to manipulate figures in their minds than girls. Social influences, girls are more likely to follow adult supervision than boys. Aggression, boys are more likely to use physical aggression in their play and to get their way, while girls participate in more cooperative play and use relational aggression to get their way. They threaten relationship structures as punishment for not getting what they want. Emotional sensitivity, girls are better able to express their emotions and interpret the emotions of others than boys. By age 2 or 3, children understand that they are either boys or girls, and they label themselves as such, and this is known as gender labeling. As children go through the preschool years, children understand that they will grow up to be men or women, depending on their gender, and this is known as gender stability. By kindergarten or the beginning of elementary school, children understand that gender will not change according to their wishes or by situation, so they can be a fireman or a nurse, and this is known as gender constancy. Males are bathed in copious amounts of androgens during gestation, which leads to their masculine behavior during childhood. It is the increased androgens during gestation that seems to make the boy baby act in a masculine fashion. With puberty, male increases in testosterone can surge to 10 times the previous level in a week. If allowed to gravitate toward people they are the most comfortable with, boys will play with boys and girls will play with girls. Children will resist playing with opposite sex partners, whether they are forced to or not. Children seem to be unhappy when they are forced to play with opposite sex playmates. When girls and boys play, it often turns conflictual because girls' interactions are cooperative or enabling to sustain play, and boys' play is constricting, where one playmate tends to emerge as the victor. When girls play with boys, the girls have a difficult time because the boys do not respond to suggestions. Boys do not want to resolve the conflict with discussion, they want to resolve the conflict with aggression. Some researchers feel that these differing styles may have an evolutionary basis. Males have evolved needing to establish position and rank in a group to survive. The female role in a group is to seek cooperation and provide an environment for the nurturing of offspring. Males have to compete with other males for reproductive rights. Women had to seek cooperation from other women and males to maintain their offspring. Parents influence children while they are playing in several ways. Sometimes they act as playmate. When they play with children, they may scaffold other behavior or changes in play to make the play more sophisticated. They may act as a mediator when they are playing with another child. They act as a social coach. The interaction is more positive if the child is securely attached to the parent. Play involves the implicit and explicit rules that the players follow the same rules for the benefit of the fun that is occurring. Cooperation is more and more likely to occur as the children get older. The younger the children are, the more egocentric they tend to be, and the less likely they are to have the language skills to negotiate cooperation. Children will model their peers' behavior, so if other peers are cooperating, they will be more likely to cooperate too. Willingness to cooperate within the groups leads to more cooperative behavior, less leads to egocentrism. Long-lasting cooperation is delicate because the first inkling of its decline will lead to a flurry of egocentric behavior. Different cultures support cooperative behavior more fervently. In China, they put a high premium on interdependence and group cohesion. Cooperation is lauded and modeled. In studies in China and Canada, observers found that cooperative play occurred 85% of the time with a select age group in China and 22% of the time with the same age group in Canada. Cooperative play leads to the modeling of other behavior. Prosocial behavior or behavior that benefits another person is more likely when cooperative play has been previously displayed. Prosocial behavior can lead to behavior where someone else benefits and the child isn't looking for any extrinsic benefit for themselves, a form of altruism. Some scientists believe that humans are predisposed toward this type of behavior because of our inability to survive without others. Prosocial behavior and altruism are preceded by understanding of the probable feelings of others. This is known as empathy. Other feelings that lead to prosocial feelings and behavior include feelings of responsibility, feelings of competence in the activity, mood of the child during the activity, understanding the social costs of the altruism. Ways to get children to foster prosocial behavior: model the behavior desired, be warm and supportive in disciplinary practices, accentuate opportunities to behave in a prosocial manner. The most communicative message that parents can give their children is to act altruistically themselves. Some children prefer to play alone. This is usually not a problem, as every child will have episodes where they prefer to play by themselves. One sign that the child is having trouble is if they wander from one group to another, but never attempt to join or participate with others in their play. Obviously, they want to interact, but can't. This child needs to be helped by adults to interact with their peers, or they might accept the role of the rejected peer. As children interact more and get used to being around each other, they will begin to play with one another. Unoccupied play is where a child watches others but does not engage in the activity themselves. Onlooker play is where the child is near enough to others while they are playing to make comments but not engage in the activity themselves. Associative play is where they join into the activity. Children are at the preschool age. Wait a minute. Children are at the preschool age and will begin recognizing peers and developing formative friendships. Friendships at this point are usually momentary and short-lived. They are most likely to play with whomever is in the vicinity or momentary playmateship. And this is my grandson playing with this little boy, and here he is sitting with the same boy and cutting something. He's got scissors, but he's sitting with that same little blonde girl that I was talking about before. Vigorous play such as wrestling, kicking, tumbling, grappling, and sometimes chasing, often accompanied by laughing and screaming. This is rough and tumble play is vigorous play such as wrestling, kicking, tumbling, grappling, and sometimes chasing, often accompanied by laughing and screaming. This play peaks in middle childhood. It drops to about 5% of playtime by age 11. This is a universal type of play since it takes place during childhood through adolescence in many diverse cultures. And this is what it looks like. They're not really killing each other. This is rough and tumble play. Organized sports are represented by organized athletic programs. Nearly 20 million U.S. children under 14 take part in team sports outside of school. 75% of these children will quit by the age of 15. Too often, the focus is on excellence and winning rather than playing and exercise. Metacognition refers to the person's ability to think about thinking. Metamemory is a person's strategies of remembering, or at least the process of understanding their ability to remember. Cognitive self-regulation refers to the strategies used to enhance memory. It isn't until the age of 6 years that a child understands that two people seeing the same thing may interpret it differently. This is known as egocentrism. A child will be in the pre-operational stage of cognitive development from age 2 until they are 6 years old. Piaget's three-mountain task: a pre-operational child is unable to describe the mountains from the clown's point of view, an indication of egocentrism according to Piaget. Another example of egocentrism is animism, or giving inanimate objects the power to think and move. Calvin's toy tiger Hobbes is a good example of a boy's imagination and its power to bring inanimate things to life, if you've ever seen a Calvin and Hobbes cartoon. Piaget referred to the narrow focus of children in the pre-operational stage as centration. A good example of centration is conversion, or the inability to understand that when something changes its shape, it doesn't change its property. In other words, these two containers have exactly the same amount of liquid in them. And the question is, does she recognize that? Children in the pre-operational stage of cognitive development tend to only think in one direction, a thought process called irreversibility. Math may be confusing for some because they understand addition, but subtraction, reversing the process, baffles them. By the pre-operational stage, children have become adept at classifications, understanding that many things can be arranged through this process: shapes, colors, textures, materials. Organization. Children in the pre-operational stage tend to see events that happen together as causing each other. If their father grunts with disgust every time he sees a bad news story on TV, the child might assume that whenever their father sees the news anchor on TV, their father will grunt with disgust. They see cause and effect where it probably does not exist. Children at this age will sometimes have a difficult time telling the difference between physical events and psychological events, misinterpreting something that should have happened with something that does happen, and this is called pre-causal thinking. The real from the imagined, the fantasy from reality, nightmares from reality. Lev Vygotsky developed his cognitive development theory based on what he observed in his native Russia. He saw children developing because they tried harder and harder tasks and were helped to learn the new tasks by teachers and parents. Vygotsky felt that learning could only take place if the level of a child's knowledge was close enough to the desired knowledge to allow a knowledgeable other to assist in the learning. This is known as the zone of proximal development. When Anne tries to put a puzzle together on her own, she can't do it. When Anne puts a puzzle together with her father, he sometimes shows her how pieces can go together. They always finish. This is an example of zone of proximal development. Teachers and parents aid children in learning by giving assistance, but only as much as the child needs to accomplish the task themselves. This is known as scaffolding, not doing it for the child, but assisting the child. Scaffolding becomes so ingrained in a child's life that when they are trying to do something on their own that is difficult, they will talk to themselves while they are doing it, and this is known as private speech. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, some children are perpetually restless, fidgety, and impulsive. They have a hard time controlling their actions and behavior. 3 to 5% of school-age children are diagnosed with ADHD, and the symptoms are overactivity, unable to keep still, unusually energetic, inattention, they do not pay attention and seem to be unable to concentrate on schoolwork. Impulsivity, they seem to act before thinking. About half the children suffering from ADHD will carry it into adulthood. More children are diagnosed with ADHD than in the past. Many researchers feel that this is not due to a misdiagnosis, but because of improved diagnostic techniques. Doctors are picking up children that were missed before, especially girls who were often excluded because of their gender. ADHD is treatable. While drug therapy has been shown to work on most ADHD cases, counselors have shown that concentrated family intervention techniques such as multimodal treatment study for children with ADHD has proven effective. Parenting strategies for children with ADHD: provide positive attention, give effective instructions, praise your child's efforts, establish rewards, use consistent consequences. And this is tough because while you are doing this with the children with ADHD, if you have children that don't have ADHD, it means that they have to be treated a little bit harsher than children are normally treated. In other words, if you didn't have a child with ADHD, it wouldn't be nearly as severe. Communicative disorders may afflict anyone as they are growing up and make learning and using language difficult. Voice disorders are difficult with the quality of the voice and may make speech unintelligible. They may have breathiness and nasal tone problems. And this is Fran. Maybe. There we go.
Very subtly look over your left shoulder and tell me if that's...
Hello, I'm Fran Drescher. I'm checking in. Hi. Excuse me, Miss Fran Drescher, but I am your biggest fan. Oh, thank you. Oh my God, you really do talk like that. Who would make this up? So I see you're into the flat hair in real life. Yeah, it's not for you. You think it makes me look fat? You know, the bigger the head, the smaller the hips.
She learned that from your show. Tell me something. What's the butler like? Is he as funny in person? I think he steals the whole show.
Can I interject? I thought you were so fabulous in My Cousin Vinny. Where do you keep your Oscar? At Marissa Tomei's house. Are you two here on vacation?
Oh, no, we're here spying on her husband who's having an affair with my girlfriend.
We did that very same story this season. Really? I didn't see that. When was it on? Now. And don't forget to watch the series finale next week. Oh, I wouldn't miss it for the world. Unless, of course, that's the night I'm having my twins.
Okay, Fran Drescher with a bit of nasal. Whoops. Fluency disorders are disruptions of the normal rate of speech patterns. Stuttering is an example of a fluency disorder. These are famous people who have had stuttering problems, and I don't have any. There we go. Okay. I don't have any arrow. Wait a minute. There we go. Oh, sorry. All right. Okay, so that's stuttering. A lot of famous people have been stutters. They were able to get over it, or they were able to change their speech pattern. Articulation disorders are where an individual has a difficult time making specific sounds. The most common articulation disorder is replacing the R and the L sound with a W sound. They may also make a D sound for a TH sound. Lisping is an articulation disorder. This is from the Big Bang Theory.
Sounds like Penny really got to him. I'm not surprised. Despite his hard and crusty shell, Howard is a very sensitive man. Do you know he writes poetry? Mostly about men from Nantucket and hermits named Dave. But he does it with real sensitivity.
Hey, Hofstadter. Wonder when the plasma lab is, you built a robot?
Yes, we did, Kripke.
His name is Monty.
Well, if you have any delusions about entering him against my robot, the Quipke Crippler, in the Southern California Robot Fighting League Round Robin Invitational, a.k.a. the SCRFLRRI, his name is gonna be Scrap Metal.
Come on, is that really necessary?
Leonard, I believe it is. This is trash talk. Trash talk is a traditional component in all sporting events. Kripke, your robot is inferior, and it will be defeated by ours, because ours exceeds yours in both design and execution. Also, I'm given to understand that your mother is overweight.
Oh, snap.
Now, of course, if that is the result of a glandular condition and not sloth and gluttony, I withdraw that comment.
What difference does it make? Fat is fat.
There are boundaries.
Tell you what, forget the SCRFLRRI. Let's settle this wabato a wabato.
What do you mean?
There's no guarantee we're gonna go against each other in the round robin, so let's throw down. You know, unless you're afraid.
We accept your challenge. Name a time and place.
Tomorrow, 3 o'clock, the Kinetics Web.
Make it so.
No, don't make it so. Barry, we can't fight you tomorrow. Our engineer is incapacitated.
What's wrong with him?
He's depressed because he's pathetic and creepy and can't get girls.
We're all pathetic and creepy and can't get girls. That's why we fight wobots. If you're not there, you'll be exposed to ridicule.
I'm curious, what part of America is that accent from?
The Kripke Crippler. And do this one. Okay, well, the lisping is gone. Okay. Reading involves word recognition, identifying a unique pattern of letters and comprehension, extracting meaning from a group of words. One of the hallmarks of learning is to read. One of the hallmarks of learning to read is learning the names of the letters. Researchers have discovered that children who learn to read the best are those who know their ABCs. A second necessity in learning to read is phonological awareness, the ability to hear and recognize the sounds of the letters. This skill will be a predictor of reading skills throughout the child's developmental period and marks a good adult reader from a poor one. Reading is taught in two major ways, whole word method and phonics. Whole word method teaches the child to recognize the whole word, while phonics teaches the child to break the word down into its basic sound structure. Each method has its merits. Whole word creates better readers. Phonics allows readers who are having difficulty recognizing words a technique to sound them out. It makes it more likely that the student will try. As children begin to read and comprehend what they are reading, they develop increased working memory capacity to encompass longer and longer sentences, and increased general knowledge of their physical, social, and psychological worlds. Children begin using expanded and more appropriate reading strategies with experience. Children are better able to monitor their comprehension. Humans are just about the only species that raises their young in the family unit. Anthropologists and evolutionary psychologists believe that families are prevalent among humans in order to assure that offspring will survive to reproduce. Humans are unable to survive on their own for several years after birth. I was just reading today, where did I read that? Oh, it was in Natural History magazine. I was just reading today about coy dogs. Coy dogs are crosses between coyotes and dogs. And it turns out that this doesn't happen very often because coyotes have their estrus at a specific time, and dogs have their estrus at different times during the year. So it's not really that common for dogs and coyotes to interbreed. And what they were saying was that coyotes are raised by both the male and the female, the father and the mother. They take care of the young, whereas dogs and coy dogs, the male dog does not take part in taking care of the offspring. So there's a different way of doing things as far as coyotes and dogs and coy dogs are concerned. And for that reason, the coy dogs don't survive nearly as readily as coyotes do. And of course, dogs only survive because they are assisted by humans. Parenting involves two dimensions: degree of warmth and responsiveness that the parents show, and the amount of control they exert over their children. Sorry, I needed to blow my nose. Authoritarian parents have a high amount of control and little warmth. Parents establish strict rules and expect their children to obey them without question. There is little interaction between the parents and their children except for the parent dictating actions and the child following. Permissive parenting style offers warmth and caring, little parental control. These parents accept anything the child wants to do. They punish infrequently. This isn't good for the child because their brains are not mature enough to make these kinds of decisions. Authoritative parenting, a fair degree of parenting control, being warm and responsive, a great deal of interaction between parents and children. Rules are set down, explained, and if need be, discussed. And that makes authoritative parenting the best type of parenting. Neglecting parenting provides no warmth, provides no control. Often the parent's desire comes before the child's. They attempt to minimize the amount of time they spend with their children. They do not get emotionally involved with their own children. Parenting styles vary across cultures. Asian cultures tend to be more collectivist and therefore accentuate a child being cooperative rather than individualistic and sticking out. Parenting in collectivist environments are less likely to support the expression of affection as compared to more individualistic cultures as in the United States. Parenting styles also vary widely within the same culture. Parents today do more explaining than was traditional 4 or 5 decades ago. This parenting model is referred to as direct instruction, where the parents explains to the child what to do, when to do it, and why they are doing it. This is often done by tying emotions and behavior. Modeling: children learn as much by watching their parents and doing what they see them do as formal instruction. And of course, this is known as modeling. For an older sister or brother, the first sibling is an encroachment on their exclusive time with their parents. The new birth is often distressing to the older sibling. Often an older child will regress and start acting younger than they are or normally do. One thing that often helps the family unity is that fathers often become more involved in the older children's lives as the mother becomes more occupied with the newborn. Many older siblings enjoy helping their parents with their care of the newborn. In some cultures, older daughters are expected to help care for their younger siblings. Sibling relationships are not easy. Some siblings will become best friends, while others will be based on conflict, arguing, and rivalry. Relationships are often set early in the interaction. I'm reading a book right now about that very thing. It's called Apples Never Fall, and it's about a family of 4 children and how they interact with one another. Now, if we look at this picture, we see that the brother has his best friend. Let me get rid of this thing. Here we go. Okay, here's my arrow. This is the brother, of course, and this is the sister that likes him, and this is the sister that doesn't like him. You can see from their face as to how they feel about their brother. I'm reading, like I said, I'm reading a book right now called Apples Never Fall. It's about 4 siblings interacting. One of the problems that this family has is that the father and the mother were both really good tennis players, and they were trying to create tennis players out of their children. And of course, that became their focus rather than taking care of the kids and taking care of their needs. It's really kind of fascinating. I haven't finished it yet, but this type of rivalry is very common among these 4 children. And each of them develop a personality that allows them to be different from their siblings. You know, there's 4 of them, so they could all be the same. In a collectivist society, they'd all be the same. But this is Australia, and it's it's really interesting because the lady that's reading it, has a really strong Australian accent. So it's really kind of fascinating, and of course the interaction between the children is quite interesting as well. Sibling relationships are based on several factors. Gender: same-sex siblings often act more harmonious than opposite-sex siblings. Temperament, the more similar the temperaments, the less likely the siblings will deal with each other emotionally. Age, siblings tend to improve relationships as they enter adolescence. My own family, there were 6 children. It's really kind of fascinating. So this is really interesting to me because I'm one of 6, and I was number 4 of 6. The last 3 were boys. There was girl, boy, girl, boy, boy, boy. So it was really kind of a fascinating interaction going on between all the siblings. Siblings who don't get along often feel that their parents have favorites in the family. Parents should be careful about praising one child over the other. Too much praise from one child may lead to undue rivalry, and the reality is that most parents actually do have a favorite, and usually their favorite is the person that is the most like them, but not always. It really all depends on the parents and their needs as to which child they find the most appealing to them. The quality of the parents' relationship will often dictate how the siblings will interact. A warm, harmonious relationship between parents will often foster positive sibling relationships. Now, I just said that all parents have a positive, have one child that they like better than all the others. That is a point of fact. If you ask parents, they'll say that they love all their children the same, but the reality is that they like the child that is usually the one that they interact with the most. They like the child that is that they had to interact with the most, I guess. And the one that's the easiest. The one that's the easiest, they tend to want to spend time with. If the relationship was, well, we won't go into all that negative stuff. Okay, so since I came from a large family, birth order is really important to me. Birth order is not nearly as important as it was 50 years ago or 70 years ago because the families were a lot larger 50 and 70 years ago. So the birth order was very, very important 50 or 70 years ago. Now that the people are having smaller families, the birth order, there's a lot of onlys out there, a lot of ones and two child families, which means one's the firstborn and one's the baby. The firstborns, parents have high expectations for the firstborns, more affectionate toward these children. They're more punitive toward them. Generally, they have higher scores on IQ tests. This is a point of fact. More likely to be successful. They're the more adult-oriented and more likely to conform to parents' wishes. And this was true in my own family. My sister was probably the most successful of all the siblings. She was a lawyer. She wanted to have the highest IQ, but it turned out that she didn't. The baby of the family had the highest IQ. And my oldest sister was really upset about that when she found out. Anyway, so oldest tends to have the highest IQ. The firstborns, they're more conscientious, ambitious, and aggressive than their younger siblings. Firstborns are overrepresented at Harvard and Yale, as well as disciplines requiring higher education, such as medicine, engineering, or law. Every astronaut to go into space has been either the oldest child in his or her family or the eldest boy. And throughout history, even when large families were the norm, more than half of all Nobel Prize winners and U.S. presidents have been firstborn. Famous eldest children include Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Richard Branson, J.K. Rowling, and Winston Churchill. And macho movie stars are firstborn too, including Clint Eastwood, John Wayne, Sylvester Stallone, Bruce Willis, and all the actors who have played James Bond have been firstborns. Middle children are the more easygoing and peer-oriented. Since they can get lost in the shuffle of their own families, They learn to build bridges to other sources of support, and therefore they tend to have excellent people skills. Middle children often take on the role of mediator and peacemaker. And of course, I'm a middle child. I'm number 4 of 6, which makes my sister and I the 2 middle children. 3 and 4 of the 2 middle children. Famous middle children include Bill Gates, JFK, Madonna, Donald Trump, Chris Hemsworth, Jennifer Lopez, Peyton Manning, Britney Spears, and Princess Diana. The youngest child tends to be the most creative and can be very charming, even manipulative. Because they often identify with the underdog, they tend to champion egalitarian causes. The youngest siblings were the earliest backers of the Protestant Reformation and the Enlightenment. They are successful in journalism, advertising, sales, and the arts. Famous youngest children include Cameron Diaz, Jim Carrey, Drew Carey, Rosie O'Donnell, Eddie Murphy, Jennifer Lawrence, Harry Styles, Ryan Gosling, Angelina Jolie, George Clooney, Zoe Saldana, Jude Law, and Billy Crystal. They were all babies of the family. Laterborns, less concerned about pleasing parents. They are more rebellious. They're more popular with their peers. They tend to be more innovative. Parents have more realistic expectations for their later-born children. Parents tend to have more relaxed discipline with later-born children. Onlys are rumored to be selfish and egotistical. Actually, they're no worse off than children born in any other order. They succeed more in school. They have higher levels of intelligence, leadership, autonomy, and maturity. The other thing, I'm guessing that I only wrote this, was writing this book. Onlys are firstborns. They're just like firstborns. So onlys and firstborns have problems. They either end up in Who's Who or they end up in prison. Most of the people in prison are onlys, are firstborns or onlys. Famous onlys, Lance Armstrong, Frank Sinatra, Natalie Portman, Robin Williams, Tiger Woods, Franklin Roosevelt, Robert De Niro, and Elvis Presley were onlys. The third crisis in Erikson's psychosocial theory takes place between the ages of 3 and 6 and encompasses initiative versus guilt, where the child learns to try new things or they don't. If the child is allowed to explore, they will develop an active attitude, which will translate as personal autonomy. If the child expands their realm of influence outside that of their family, they are more likely to develop autonomy. This is my grandson again. This is my grandson right here, and that's his buddy JJ. And we've seen JJ and Reese's picture a lot. If the child is stunted by their family or themselves, they will have a difficult time developing a sense of autonomy. We're talking about Erikson's psychosocial theory. They may feel shame for their lack of inner drive. When they do attempt to be autonomous, it may feel incorrect to them, causing them to feel guilt. And that is the end of the chapter. And that's a good thing because I need to feed the dogs. So I'll talk to you guys later, next week. We'll tackle chapter 7 next week. We're getting close to midterm. There is no midterm in this class. We're also getting close to spring break. It is March 7th through the 13th, I believe. So have fun. 7th, 8th. I think I do one more chapter. I'm pretty sure I do one more chapter before spring break. So see you next week.